Welcome back, everybody, to Stream 2 here on day 3 of the virtual Drupa. Today is World Earth Day, and everything here is evolves around sustainability. And also our next topic with the interesting title, Make Sustainability Fashionable, Make Fashion Sustainable. I'm going to tell you a bit about what to expect. Now, despite a growing social trend for sustainability in the EU, textile and fashion industry, Europeans are quoted as consuming an average of 26 kilograms of textiles per person per year. Again, 26 kilograms per person per year. And each item is reportedly used only for a short period of time, resulting in 11 kilograms of textiles being discarded per person every year. Now, a number of initiatives are being undertaken, obviously, within Europe to address sustainability within the fashion sector, and the printing industry is directly impacted by the sustainability shift. Now, this session, organized on World Earth Day, will open with a presentation by the European Chemicals Agency and will include a panel discussion with some of the world's leading ink manufacturers. Looking forward to hearing more about this with the help of our host for this session. She is the Director of the Chemical Compliance Advisory Services, Elaine Campling. Elaine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much for that introduction to this great session that we have planned for today.
Elaine, maybe you can tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So aside from running my own chemical compliance business, which focus on chemical regulation, not just for supply, but also in relation to environment. But as I say, aside from that, I'm also the chair of ESMA's Health, Safety and Environmental Protection Committee. And I have a strong focus on environment and have been very much interested in sustainability of the textile industry.
And you've brought some guests along who you're probably going to introduce now also, and then we'll get right into the panel, right?
Yes, I have. So I'm joined on the panel today by Eric Beyeler, who is the Global Marketing Manager for Artistri Inkjet Inks at DuPont, and also by Dr. Simon Daplin, who is the Product Marketing Manager for Sun Chemicals Digital Ink business. And we're fortunate, as you mentioned, to be joined by Dr. Uti Tanella, who is the Scientific Officer at the European Chemicals Agency. On the topic of the sustainability of the textile industry, Uti is going to give us a short presentation, which we are looking forward to, and we'll start right now. So Uti, can I hand over to you, please? And could you let me know when you would like me to move to the next slide?
Yes, thank you very much. Just finding the right button. Indeed, okay, I'm a little bit the odd man out here, indeed, because I have very little to do with the industry you all represent. So, but I was asked to sort of go a little bit into the regulatory side of things. And now, indeed, I work at the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, and we are involved in the sustainability issues. We're not entirely sure yet how much and what our role entirely is, but through what we do in our daily work, we definitely are a player. So could I have the next slide? Firstly, of course, I'm talking about chemicals and what is sustainable chemistry, what are safe chemicals, what are sustainable chemicals. This is all something that is actually under discussion. You probably are aware that the chemical strategy for the Commission was published late last year. It's been a topic of a lot of discussion, and it is a part of the whole zero pollution, which is part of the Green Deal. So it all ties together. the point is to indeed improve efficiency with the natural resources, clearly, when we talk about chemistry. But then it's very important to think about the design and the manufacture, the use of efficient, safe, environmentally benign chemical products and processes. And it's not all about environment, it's also about human health. Next slide. Regarding textiles, of course, that's the big lump area. You're involved in the printing side of the textiles, but clearly that is a very integral part of textiles. So anything that is covered by, let's say, the EU strategy for sustainable textiles would apply to the printing industry in the same way. So it's less toxic chemicals in the whole supply chain, more resistant materials, which can comply with the circular economy principles. So you can get rid of the bad substances in order to be able to circulate the materials and the final products in themselves. Less waste, less disintegration into microplastics. That's a big topic currently. The transport thing, well, okay, it applies to anything that is transported, and of course, social responsibility. They're all parts of sustainability, eventual sustainability criteria. The next slide. And so obviously this all covers the whole process design, the substance design, what are the substances used, and indeed the chemical content of a product. It's not about what you put into the product at this point of time, but if you're using recycled materials, you need to know what there is already in there. And as far as I know, the printing inks, etc., have been quite a big part of certain discussions regarding whether it's textiles or paper or whatever recycling. Just a mention that clearly all of this will take resources, but how to make it more attractive to those who buy it, whether it's consumers or professionals. Sustainability is also an advertising, let's say, promoter. Next slide. Through regulation, we try for whatever products we're talking about. We push for a substitution of the most hazardous substances with less hazardous ones. Clearly, the worst ones need to be restricted in one way or another, whether it's through regulation such as REACH, or whether it's product-related regulation. Those are the two paths. Then under REACH, we also have the authorization process, which requires a proof of safe use. So if you are indeed using some hazardous substance which does not have an appropriate substitute, you need to show that it can be used safely. And the safe use of articles and the appropriate waste management measures are something that is fairly new. So this information needs to follow the article, ideally throughout the life cycle, so that indeed at the time of reaching the waste operators, the recycling can be done in such a manner that the worst substances do not go back into the circulation. Next slide, please. And I've already mentioned, well, you are fully aware of the general legislative framework. I mean, we have REACH and CLP. Then the skip, I will say a couple more words about skip later. For textiles, okay, the biocidal products and eco labels, etc., they are also relevant. And then the specific legislation for textiles, as far as I know, is quite limited. There, it's more about terminology issues. Next slide. Just a quick overview of examples of problematic chemicals that I saw to be relevant for the ink industry. And obviously, if you're working in this area, these are fully familiar to you, and you know that this kind of substances, in one way or another, you need to find substitutes, you need to find appropriate risk management measures, and they shouldn't really be in the final textile. Next slide. Under REACH, we have quite a few restrictions, and this just is a list of those restrictions that would be directly related to textiles, and therefore also related to whatever is put on the textile. If you have something that comes into, even theoretically, let's say on the outside of the garment, it is potentially something that comes into contact with the human skin, and this makes many restrictions sort of applicable to those parts of textiles. On the next slide, I just have two upcoming restrictions which would be of interest, I'm sure, because the skin sensitizers in textiles in general, that is something under preparation and will affect a great deal of substances. I mean, very many, and which I am not able to say how it will go, because the preparation of the restriction is still sort of in the first early phases, but this is undergoing. And then you have heard about the microplastics initiatives, and we have a microplastics restriction which has been sort of approved, but that would not necessarily be entirely relevant at present for you, because indeed this does not address the generation of microplastics from macro size plastics by degradation, which is clearly an issue with certain synthetic textiles. But this is about the use of micro-size plastics in the production of products. Next slide. Then the skip database. In case you have managed to miss the information about this database, which is based on the Waste Framework Directive. The SKIP acronym comes from Substances of Concern in Products. So under REACH, you need to provide information on the substances of very high concern when they are present in articles in a concentration above 0.0%. And this information needs to be provided to anyone who is a professional user, sort of proactively, whereas to consumers, you need to provide the information on request. However, now the Waste Framework Directive and the sort of now provides an obligation to anyone, every supplier who is placing articles on the market needs to check in principle whether these articles contain SVHCs, substances of very high concern. And if this is the case, then the article or the complex object within which this article resides needs to be notified to the SKIP database, which is hosted by ECHA. I say that this obligation to notify applies to all articles without exemption and all suppliers, but for suppliers there is an exemption. So if, which is, okay, if someone is supplying directly to consumers only, retailers that is, they would not be required to submit such notifications. But this means that for a textile producer, they would really need to know whether the print of the textile would contain an SVHC in such a quantity that they would be subject to this notification. And then the last slide, that is just a simply a glossary. And then if you want to have more information regarding articles and substances in articles, I just put the links there for the guidance and for the skip data notifications, because, well, someone might indeed be interested in these areas. So I think that's my introduction into the sort of regulatory side, and I give the floor back to you, Elaine.
Well, thank you very much for that excellent presentation, and it certainly puts some of the regulatory checks and balances into perspective, which I think is contributes in general to the holistic approach that we need to make fashion sustainable. And that was a great sort of insight into the reasons that the skip database and other initiatives have been put in place by the European Chemicals Agency. I'd like now, please, to turn some questions to our panelists, and perhaps I could start with Eric by asking what are your thoughts on screen and inkjet, digital inkjet technologies, and how they can improve the goal of sustainability, and what are your views about the differences in the sustainability potential of the two technologies?
Well, thank you, Elaine, and yes, that's a big question, and I'm going to warn the audience is I'm going to try not to take the entire 20-25 minutes left for our panel. So please, Elaine, feel free to stop me if I go too long. But there's multiple levels on where the choice of manufacturing that you have in the world of textile printing is going to impact the impact to environment, right? The environmental footprint altogether. And so, yes, there's a difference if you're going to do your traditional, printing and dyeing methods versus water-based inkjet printing, which is most of the digital textile printing is based on. So already the chemistries of the products there are different. The processes that are used are different. The efficiency of these processes are different. And the resources these processes use outside of the essential products, right? You need a colorant and you need a substrate. And to put them together, one of the advantages of inkjet printing is you need a machine, but with some of the chemistries, and especially if you think about pigment-based, water-based inkjet printing, you do not need anything but your equipment, the ink, and the substrate. There's no washing, you don't use extra water, right? So your footprint when you use water-based pigment inkjet printing is very limited from an environmental footprint. So, and it's very flexible from a space standpoint also. If you think about the size of the equipment that you need, these are smaller size equipment. So it can be very flexible. So there's all kinds of advantages. And then the last thing is with the digital process, you can stop and go and change the image in a very flexible way. Whereas in the traditional methods, if you want, because you physically design the image on an item, then to change the image is a more complex procedure. So short runs are very doable with digital printing. So I think there are, from the processes and the products that we use, we can make a significant impact on the sustainability, if you want, from end to end of the textile printing process.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for that great summary there. I have experience also of the different technologies, and I think both have an important role to play going forward. And certainly as the textile print market grows for digital, there will be some opportunities going forward. I think another good question, perhaps to Oti, if you don't mind answering this question, if you can, given that you've just given that great presentation. How do you see trade associations playing a role in the goal of sustainable textiles or eco-fashion going forward? What recommendations would you have to trade associations, and how they can sort of influence their members and effect change?
Yes, well, I mean, okay, regarding the trade associations, I see their role as quite a big one. Not everyone is probably following all kinds of say developments as closely, so they have a role in both education and sort of increasing the awareness of their membership. But they should also, I mean, proactively look into the sort of substitutes for certain substances, because from Eric's talk here, the question arises regarding digital printing. I'm sure probably the amounts of chemicals you need would be smaller than in the conventional methods. So that would also be very good from a sustainability and safety perspective. But when you think about water-based, then I immediately think about would you then have certain other things? You might need to have preservatives, which are again mostly sensitizers. So if you're talking about textile printing, you need to take care that that type of chemicals don't suddenly appear there where you don't really want them. Yeah, and the dyes on themselves, of course, and the durability. So everything there plays a role, and this for the textile associations, they are probably pretty well placed to look at these sort of generally used substances and to determine whether there are needs to substitute them with something else, if there are possibilities to substitute them, and how to minimize the exposure from these.
Thank you, Oti. It's clear you know quite a bit more about the printing industry than you perhaps thought you did at the start of the session.
Use of logic, let's say.
Thank you. Could I ask Simon, please, to pick up on some of those points made by Oti, in particular with regards to, you know, less chemicals used in the digital ink process, please, and any other comments that you would have on that point.
Sure. So thanks, Elaine. So I think there's a couple of points that we can highlight, particularly in reference to digital print, which I guess has been touched on already. But the reduced amount of chemicals that you add to the garment is certainly there. The up to kind of 90% reduction, if you go by general reports, we're reducing water and waste. So there's significant advantages. Of course, there are chemistries of concern, and I think from an ink manufacturer's point of view and a general industry point of view, where the agencies can help or provide guidance is by clarifying something that becomes more standard. What we often struggle with is that there are a number of initiatives and there are people doing great work in this area, or organizations like ZDHC, so Zero Discharge of Hazardous Waste. You have Architects, you have various bodies within the industry, all talking around a similar theme, but with different requirements, different limits on certain materials. And then many of the brands have their own standards that they apply to themselves. And so having something that's that could be lobbied as a coherent set of guidelines for everybody to kind of follow would certainly help in terms of guiding the chemistry providers into the industry as to exactly what the maximum limits of certain chemicals. I mean, Oti mentions biocides as a particular issue, and there's been a lot of, let's say, reclassification of biocides in recent years that has meant a lot of us have had to look at formulations and ways of preserving inks due to certain changes in legislations. And some apply in Europe, they don't necessarily apply to other parts of the world, and having some kind of standardization would certainly help all of us to provide the right chemistry in the safest way possible.
Yes, thank you, Simon. I think you made some really good points there, because there are different aspects and elements to achieving this goal. Some controls are already in place that we can use, such as the brand standards and also the certification models that are out there, as well as some of these regulatory controls that we've mentioned. I think there is an opportunity, as you've alluded to, for trade associations, perhaps to pull some of this together, and organizations such as ESMA, and try to make a sort of unified approach to it, bringing all of these inputs together. And that is something maybe ESMA and other trade associations can think about. One element to consider is that sustainability is more than ecology, and what are the other critical aspects of a balanced and fair textile supply chain that we haven't thought about here today. Could I go around the panel and pose that question, please, starting with Eric, if you don't mind taking the lead in starting this discussion off.
Yeah, so that one is a little more complex. As you know, we're in the on the ink side of the business, so not much part of the entire textile trade picture, right? But as you described, having fair trade and the ability to sell throughout the world is always important for all of us on the business side, and the same way, providing the people who work in the industry with, and that maybe links to the discussion we had before. Sometimes we think about environmental regulations and footprint and sustainability. We tend to think of just the end user. I'm thinking from the people who manufacture the chemicals, who put the ink together, who print the ink. There's people all along, right, that value chain that are involved, and their level of exposure is quite different, versus an end user. And we need to think about all that, right? Is the last thing that I think any employer would want is to put their employees in harm's way, or to put their customers in harm's way, right? So all that is important, and the sustainability of a business, right, is also one that you have availability of product to purchase that you can use, and you can use in a responsible way. And as you sell it, you result in revenue that continues to grow your activity. So I think all that actually fits very well together. That's why I think for us, sustainability and business success and trade is all really going in the same direction.
Yes, thank you, Eric. I think that there's some good points made there, that we have to think about sustainability of a business also, and in many respects, opportunities arise from having these desires for a more sustainable future. And I think that is one element that the print industry, along with other industries, will take into consideration going forward. The amount of textiles that excuse me, are produced and then wasted are obvious concern, as highlighted in the introduction to this session. And all of the inputs into those textiles, the energy, the water, the transportation, and the consumables that are necessary to produce that product mean that there is a supply chain consideration that we must look at when looking for eco design and more sustainability of the fashion industry. And I'm only touching on a few points there. Could I also pose the same question to Simon, please? Just to recap, it was sustainability is more than ecology, and what other critical aspects of a balanced and fair textile supply chain are perhaps relevant to the print industry?
Sure. So if I try and tie that with the comment that you just made, because I think they are linked. A lot of it does kind of link back to ecology in a way, but where we as an industry in textile, but also kind of most industries kind of need to think is our reliance, or the amount of production that goes on in Asia, Southeast Asia in particular, and making sure that the workers and that whole supply chain, the ethics of doing that, of paying a fair wage, of not just locating your manufacturing in a site where you can pay people less, or there's maybe less regulation on some of the chemical inputs and outputs from the production point of view. And I certainly think when you link that through to your comment about waste and the amount of garments that are produced but never worn, I mean, it's a fairly shocking statistic. And in some ways, weirdly, the pandemic that we're all kind of experiencing now will potentially accelerate the change in this direction, along with new technology adoption. So one of the issues that the Western economy has is a lot of the production is in Asia, which means you're on 3-month lead times in terms of production, getting the product finished, getting it on a ship or a plane, getting it to the store and the consumer. And when a tragedy like this hits, there was a lot of stock for a specific season of the year that was either stuck in a factory in the middle of production, or on a boat when shops and retail outlets shut, which meant there's going to be a huge amount of waste because a lot of people had inventory tied up because of where it was being produced and how it was being produced. And I think what we'll see now is a move to bring production closer to the consumer, and not printing or producing so much of it so that you can replenish product as and when it's sold, rather than producing a huge amount of stock and hoping that it sells. So I think you'll see a much more dynamic supply chain. I think digital technology industry 4.0 will kind of drive that to happen, to make us produce in a more focused way, both for in terms of the people and the workers, but also the consumer need and the amount of waste that we're producing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. And that was very interesting. I think for sure we need to produce more locally, as you say. I think also the pandemic has had an impact also, obviously, on the textile industry in terms of personal protective equipment, the need for that, and it being produced in vast quantities. From a personal protection point of view, the face masks, and we've seen really a lot more need for this type of protective equipment textile to be produced, and that is something that we will have to think about going forward in the future with regards to local production. Oti, do you have any further comments in relation to discussing there?
Yes, I mean, the workers' perspective is of course something very important, something we also work on quite a lot. But then you were wondering also, so like, what the European industry as such could do. I mean, for one thing, I mean, for everything you need to consider what's sustainability, in the sense what needs to be sustained. Okay, sustainability includes the well-being of workers, the provision of work to workers, etc. But then, because we also need to think about the sustainability in terms of longer term issues when we are no longer here. But then how to work towards that in the supply chain. It would be good to set already, even without sort of official criteria, there should be criteria so that you only buy raw materials and chemicals that fulfill the criteria of sustainability, let's say, that they have been produced in processes that fulfill the requirements for sustainability, for social responsibility, etc. So every step of the supply chain would be much encouraged to really think about where they buy and to ensure that those they buy from fulfill these criteria. Then it will be much easier for that step and the following step to sort of make sure and sort of be sure that they are working on a basis that is sustainable. Because if the steps before you are not sustainable, then what can you do? Yeah, it's not.
Yes,
it's not just a principle. You just sort of have to act.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to demonstrate your credentials, and that is one thing I know that analysts work hard on within their organizations, and it is something that ESMA as a trade association also tries to promote with its members. You have to act, not just talk, and we do try to demonstrate that within the trade association activities, if you like, and it's a process of change, as you mentioned, and we are looking not only to our industry but to other industries across a global sphere, thinking for the future, not just for the now, and finding those opportunities to effect change. Just before we wrap up, I just want to say, if there are any questions, ESMA will gladly put them to the panelists later, and then publish them on the website. And I'm sure that you can contact ESMA to reach the panelists if you would like any further information, advice, or help with the topics discussed today. So if there are no other comments, shall I hand back to Chris now for the final moments of this session.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Thank you to all panelists for your valuable insights. wishing you a wishing you all continued success. Stay healthy, everybody, and hope to see each other again next time in person. So I'd like to say goodbye and see you again soon. Thank you.